You've felt it, you've witnessed it, and maybe in a moment you don't talk about, you've even been it. That person at the party, eyes glassy, voice just a little too loud, truth spilling out like broken glass on a clean floor, a joke that wasn't funny, a secret that shouldn't have been told, a rage that had no warning. The room goes quiet, the air changes, and long after the night ends, the moment doesn't. They wake up with a headache and hazy memories. But the people around them remember everything. The screenshots, the stares, the awkward silence the next time they enter a room. A new question begins to rise slowly and uncomfortably. Was that the real them? Or just the alcohol talking? There's something unsettling, almost sacred about those moments when the mask slips. When the curated self, the socially approved version of us, breaks under the weight of something darker, deeper, or simply more honest. What spills out? A hidden truth? A buried wound? Or just chaos? We're about to explore what really happens when the mask slips, when alcohol dissolves restraint and something raw emerges. Is that your truth speaking, or just noise? Through the lens of Nietzsche's darkest insights and Carl Jung's hidden psychology, we'll uncover what your unfiltered moments are really trying to tell you. Why some people fear their drunk self, and why maybe they should. Stay with me till the end, because this isn't just a breakdown of behavior. It's a confrontation with identity, and the answers might change the way you see yourself forever. Friedrich Nietzsche built an entire philosophy around this fracture. He believes society teaches us to wear masks, that civilization itself is built on a lie, on suppression, on restraint, on self-denial dressed up as maturity. We're told to be good, to be calm, to be in control. But beneath the surface, something else lives, something older, wilder, less polite. What happens when that part finally speaks? The Latin phrase, in vino veritas, in wine there is truth, carries both warning and wonder. We repeat it like folklore, sometimes to laugh off what we said, sometimes to excuse what we did, but deep down it lingers. What if it's true? What if the unfiltered self is closer to who we really are? This isn't a video about drinking. It's about the self behind the performance, the parts of you that only show up when the mind loses its grip. It's about what freedom looks like when the rules disappear, and whether that freedom reveals something terrifying or something true. So stay with me. We're going deeper than opinions and surface behavior. We're going into the raw mechanics of the human soul, into Nietzsche's most dangerous insights, into the terrifying possibility that what we suppress is exactly what shapes us. And the unfiltered moment? That might not be the exception. It might be the revelation. You're sitting at a bar. The air is heavy with cheap cologne, half-spilled drinks, and songs from a playlist no one really chose. Across the room, someone's laughing too loud. Their cheeks are flushed, eyes glossed over, voice a little too honest for comfort. They raise a glass and say something that makes the whole group go quiet. It's not outrageous, it's just true, uncomfortably true, about someone in the room, maybe about themselves, maybe about you. Later they'll apologize, say they didn't mean it, that it was the alcohol talking. But part of you wonders, what if it wasn't? We've all seen it. A friend crying over a long-forgotten breakup, a late-night text that reads like a confession, a phone call at 2 a.m. laced with bitterness, secrets, or unspoken love. Some of it seems random. Some of it feels like a scream the person's been holding in for years. We've given this phenomenon a name: drunk words or sober thoughts, or, if you prefer your philosophy in Latin, in vino veritas. In wine there is truth. We repeat the phrase like an incantation, as if it holds a deeper wisdom. As if alcohol doesn't distort reality, but reveals it. But does it? Why are we so fascinated by the idea that alcohol unveils our hidden selves? Why do we fear what people say when they're drunk, even when they're people we love? Why does the 3 a.m. version of someone feel like a stranger wrapped in familiar skin? There's something about those unfiltered moments that stirs discomfort. We want to believe we know people, that their words during the day reflect their inner compass, But when that compass spins wildly under the influence of alcohol, we're forced to reconsider. Maybe the anger wasn't just a moment. Maybe the affection wasn't just a phase. Maybe what they said, slurred, raw, unpolished, wasn't entirely false. It's this tension that makes drunk confessions feel like a double-edged sword. On one hand, they break through layers of civility, giving us something honest. On the other, they lack control, context, and often compassion. They can be cruel, misguided, even dangerous. Still, we remember them. Because no matter how messy, how uncomfortable, how poorly timed, they cut through the noise. And somewhere deep down, part of us wonders whether what we heard in those vulnerable moments wasn't just a drunken mistake, but the truth no one else dared to say. Friedrich Nietzsche was not interested in politeness. He didn't care much for societal approval, nor for the comfortable lies we tell ourselves to survive the day. He was obsessed with one thing: truth. Not the kind found in books or dictated from pulpits, but the raw, terrifying kind that lives beneath the surface of our identities. Truth that feels more like a wound than a revelation. To Nietzsche, most people walk through life as edited versions of themselves, carefully curated, filtered for public consumption, a smile here, a nod there, agreement when you disagree, silence when you should scream. We wear masks so often that eventually we forget we're wearing them at all. He saw civilization itself as one long performance, a necessary illusion built to keep the chaos at bay. But that illusion comes with a cost. To participate in society, we must suppress the very instincts that make us human: our desires, our rage, our wildness. We bury them under etiquette, religion, ideology, and distraction. We call it maturity, responsibility, morality. Nietzsche called it a tragedy. He believed that buried within each of us was a vast ocean of repressed instincts, some noble, some monstrous, and that most people spent their lives terrified of ever meeting their real self. Instead, they crafted masks, personas, roles to play, anything to avoid the rawness of what lies beneath. And yet every so often the mask slips. Sometimes it happens under pressure, in rage, in grief, but more often than not, it happens under the influence. Alcohol, strangely enough, becomes a kind of philosopher's key. It unlocks the door we spend all day pretending doesn't exist. The ego dissolves, the filters short circuit, the unconscious speaks. So the question arises, when someone drinks and says something unsettlingly honest, is it their real self speaking? Or is it just another version, equally masked, just more chaotic? Nietzsche wouldn't have answered directly. He hated easy answers. But he would have pointed you to the deeper question. What are you hiding that takes that much effort to suppress? And what does it say about your so-called true self if it only appears when you lose control? Maybe the self that emerges when the mask falls isn't the whole truth. Maybe it's just the unedited version, the part you keep locked away so no one, yourself included, ever has to confront it. Maybe we aren't as civilized as we pretend. Maybe, just maybe, that's the point Nietzsche was trying to make all along. Carl Jung believed that within each of us, there is a hidden figure, a figure made of all the things we deny, suppress, and exile from the light. He called it the shadow. It's not necessarily evil, though it can be. It's not necessarily dangerous, though it often feels that way. It's simply the part of you that you refuse to see, the part that society taught you to fear. The shadow is made up of urges we weren't allowed to express, desires that didn't fit the rules, thoughts we judged too dark to acknowledge, anger we pushed down, envy we tried to convert into politeness, even talents we were told were too much, too loud, too selfish. All of it is locked away behind the walls of our conscious mind, hidden but not gone, silent but still alive. Jung warned that anything we refuse to face within ourselves will eventually control us from the shadows. What you don't confront, you act out. What you disown, you project onto others. You say, I would never do that. But secretly, part of you already has, if only in thought. Now enter alcohol. Alcohol doesn't just loosen you up. It disrupts the balance between your ego and the deeper layers of your psyche. It dulls the superego, the part of your mind responsible for restraint, social norms, and morality. The rules fade, the mask slips. The shadow sees a crack of light and steps forward. This is why so many people wake up after a night of drinking, feeling a mixture of shame, confusion, and fear. They remember what they said or did, and it doesn't fit with who they believe they are. Or worse, it fits too well, and they've spent their whole lives pretending otherwise. Sometimes alcohol reveals something honest, a buried truth, a repressed feeling, a raw piece of the self that was never allowed to speak. But not everything that emerges from the unconscious is meaningful. Some of it is static, distorted signals from unresolved trauma. Others are echoes of childhood pain, loss, or fear. Alcohol can unlock the door, but it doesn't come with a map. What escapes might be revelation or chaos. This is the danger, to confuse emotional outbursts for wisdom, to believe that anything raw is therefore true, to trust every dark impulse as authentic just because it feels intense. Jung didn't suggest embracing the shadow blindly. He spoke of integration, of learning to recognize the parts of yourself you've buried, not to become them, but to stop being ruled by them. The shadow isn't your enemy, it's your teacher, but only if you're willing to stay conscious when it appears. And alcohol, by design, pulls you away from consciousness. So when the shadow steps forward in a drunken haze, it may show you something you needed to see, or it may just be a scream from the basement of your mind. Loud, terrifying, and not entirely real. Either way, you're left with the same challenge, to face what you found and decide what you'll do with it. A drunk thought used to vanish the next day like mist at sunrise. You said something strange, someone laughed, someone got offended, and by morning it was over. Forgotten, forgiven, or at least buried deep enough to pretend it never happened. Now it's different. Now it's recorded. The things you say in the middle of the night, the impulsive texts, the voice notes, the rage tweets you thought you deleted, don't disappear. They live on in screenshots, in cloud backups, in private group chats and forwarded threads. Every impulsive outburst has a digital afterlife, and it can return at any moment, no longer a mistake, but evidence. Not a moment, but a pattern. This is the paradox of our time. We are told to be real, to be raw, to be honest. Vulnerability is marketed as authenticity. Social media is filled with slogans. Speak your truth. Be unfiltered. Show the real you. Yet the second that truth is messy, when it doesn't align with the moral fashion of the moment, it becomes ammunition. A reason to exile, to cancel, to shame. Nietzsche would have found this both predictable and ironic. He knew that most people don't actually want truth. They want comfort. They want familiarity dressed up as honesty. They want truth that flatters their worldview, not truth that threatens it. So when someone loses control, whether through alcohol, exhaustion, or emotional collapse, and reveals something raw, society reacts with outrage. Not because it's false, but because it's too real, too ugly, too chaotic to fit the clean narratives we've built for ourselves. We crave transparency, but only when it's beautiful. We praise openness until someone says something we don't want to hear. Then we punish them for not keeping the mask on. And so we're stuck in a loop, desperate to be seen, terrified to be judged, longing for connection, afraid of exposure. We drink, we post, we confess, we stumble. Then we're held accountable not just for what we meant, but for what we said in our most unguarded moment. There is no mercy for the unfiltered self, not anymore. In Nietzschean terms, we are killing the very instinct we claim to admire. The will to express, to defy, to speak raw truth is mutilated by a culture that can't decide whether it wants authenticity or perfection. We demand both, and in doing so, destroy the possibility of either. So the question remains, is the problem the truth or the fact that it doesn't look the way we hoped it would? We love the idea of freedom, of breaking the rules, of finally saying what we mean without worrying how it lands. That's the promise hidden inside a bottle, the illusion that when you're drunk, you're free. But what if that freedom is a trick? What if, instead of setting you free, it simply removes the filter that keeps you human? It's tempting to believe that your drunk self is the real you, that the words you slur are the truths you're too afraid to say, that the confessions, the rage, the longing, the strange admissions, they must come from somewhere deep, somewhere honest. Maybe they do, or maybe they don't. Maybe they're fragments, distorted echoes from a mind no longer anchored by clarity. Maybe they're not revelations, but eruptions of confusion, of fantasy, of pain that never got a name. This is where the idea of authenticity becomes complicated. We assume that being real means being raw, but real doesn't always mean unfiltered, and raw doesn't always mean meaningful. Nietzsche would have understood this contradiction. He believed that desire is one of the most powerful forces in the human psyche. And when we're drunk, that desire often takes center stage. The desire to be loved, to be seen, to hurt, to dominate, to confess, to destroy. But desire by itself isn't truth. It's impulse. It's heat without light. So the question shifts. When you're drunk, are you becoming more yourself, or are you just losing the very structure that makes you coherent? The ego, the superego, the values you've shaped and fought for, they all step aside. What's left might be the shadow, or it might just be static. Noise, emotion with no story. We want to believe that the self who emerges in those moments is real, because if we can name it, we can understand it, control it, accept it. But what if the drunk self is only one version? Not a lie, not the truth, just a signal. One frequency in a much larger broadcast. A snapshot, not the whole picture. Authenticity, then, isn't about what you do when the world isn't watching. It's what you choose when you know exactly who's watching and why. The drunk self might expose something important, but don't mistake exposure for enlightenment. Chaos can teach. So can confusion. But neither should be worshipped as wisdom. Not everything that escapes the cage of inhibition deserves to be crowned as truth. Sometimes it's just what was loudest when the mind fell asleep. Friedrich Nietzsche saw the human psyche as a battlefield, not between good and evil or right and wrong, but between two ancient forces, the Apollonian and the Dionysian. Reason versus chaos, structure versus instinct. One builds civilizations, the other tears down illusions. Most of us live in a world that worships the Apollonian. We prize order, logic, discipline, and restraint. We are taught to value clarity, symmetry, and control. The rules are everything. Keep your voice down. Know your place. Think before you speak. Smile even when you're dying inside. In such a world, the Dionysian becomes a threat. The Dionysian is everything we're told to suppress. It's the intoxication of instinct, the madness of creativity, the scream that comes before the song. It is desire without apology, rage without reason, grief without filter. When someone drinks, when the mask slips, when the polite script dissolves into chaos, that's the Dionysian rising. Nietzsche didn't fear this force. He believed it was essential. Without it, life becomes sterile, robotic, soulless. Without it, we don't live. We perform. The Dionysian breaks through our carefully rehearsed identities and reminds us that beneath the rules and routines, we are still animals, still burning, still wild. But he also knew its danger. Unleashed without balance, the Dionysian doesn't just free, it destroys. It doesn't just reveal, it consumes. This is why Nietzsche believed it must be tempered by the Apollonian, not suppressed by it, not buried, balanced. When instinct dances with reason, when chaos is held by form, something transcendent can emerge. Article vision, truth. The drunk self, then, is not evil. It is not even false. It is Dionysian. It tears down the facade and shows us what's hidden beneath. Sometimes that's liberating, sometimes it's horrifying. But without that confrontation, we remain strangers to ourselves. To live fully is not to choose one force over the other. It is to learn how to hold both and survive the fire that comes with it. Nietzsche didn't want us to silence ourselves. He didn't call for repression or denial. He wanted us to awaken, to become conscious of the storm within us, not to be ruled by it, but to understand it, to master it. The truth, when unfiltered, can be raw. It can be uncomfortable, even violent. But truth without understanding is only half a revelation. It can be used to hurt, it can be misunderstood, misused, turned into a weapon against the self or others. That's why consciousness matters. Awareness is not about perfection. It's not about always being composed or correct. It's about noticing the voices inside you, the ones that whisper when you're alone, the ones that scream when you lose control. It's about listening without judgment, interpreting without panic, and responding with clarity. Maybe your drunk words don't lie, but maybe they don't tell the full story either. They are fragments, reflections, echoes, sometimes warnings, sometimes truths you've been afraid to admit, and sometimes just noise. The task isn't to fear them, it's to understand where they come from and what they're asking you to confront. If this made you think differently about yourself, your impulses, or your story, share it. Leave a comment. Tell us what your unfiltered moments have taught you. Like the video if it made you feel seen. And subscribe if you're ready to go deeper into the human mind, into power, into meaning, into the parts of ourselves we rarely dare to explore. The journey isn't about becoming someone else. It's about finally seeing who was there all along. If this video helped you see yourself in a new light, don't just walk away in silence. Leave a comment. Share the moment you faced your unfiltered self and what it revealed. Like this video if it made you think. Subscribe if you're ready to go deeper into the human mind, the systems that shape us, and the truths we've been taught to bury. This isn't about answers, it's about awakening. And this is just the beginning.